It looks like the winning story is Amazon sued for racial discrimination against Black and Latinx employees with 15 votes.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk
That's
about
what I just saw. Jennifer, I'll go ahead and start on that story. I spent time at AWS as an L6, and I was there for about 9 months, and I concluded that this was not the place for me
it. Mhm.
because I was living to work, not working to live.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt I was in a position of I am way too old for this shit.
Mhm.
And I was supporting two different groups there at the time. And what I found was one group that I worked with was actually excellent. It was like working in a small startup, and I've worked in small startups. And the second group that I worked with, it was like the New York Times story. People crying at their desks, people working 16, 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, impossible demands, people screaming at each other in meetings, open contempt, and what I felt were, wouldn't say anything I saw that rose to the level of overt sexism or racism, but definitely lots of microaggressions and a lot of, oh, wow, that was a gross comment.
Mhm.
Um, I'm way out of my period of when I can't talk about this stuff. My non disparaging clause is gone. And frankly, it is so far back. It would be hard for me at this point to say what the culture is like there. Um, we know that Jeff Bezos got a divorce and gave up 50% of his fortune over a helicopter pilot. I
Mhm.
just like, it's not just a, Jennifer, it's not like the money thing, but it's just like, was it that magical?
Yeah.
Really? Really? And I'm no fan of Bezos, and we have seen other companies like look what's going on with Google and how they're treating the black employees in the AI space. And I mean, that's pretty naked what's going on there because you have literally thousands of Google employees that have signed on going, what the
What's the
fuck?
F-bomb?
Yeah.
This is written. This is written.
Anyway, there's no space for this. And as somebody who has worked, who's most of my corporate career was in tech, for the
Mhm.
love of God, malcontents, we need more patrons. I don't want to go back to tech. Don't, please. Save the malcontent. I don't want to. I'm too feral.
We need
I'm too
first.
feral to go back to corporate America. Okay, it just I can't. I'm too feral. But I can say this about the tech industry: it's very male. It's
Mhm.
very white. Misogyny is off the frickin' chart in the space, particularly with women who are specifically in STEM and not in the traditional female roles like marketing, HR, legal, corporate affairs.
Yep.
Right? That's where people think women jobs. Oh yeah, like women that are devs, SDETs. It's brutal,
Yeah.
and it's in a very white industry. There is almost no representation at the high levels for Black, Indigenous, and Latinx employees.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I'm a white woman, but I've worked in predominantly male industries my entire adult life. I worked in actually horse racing before I went back to school, which was all pretty much all male dominated. And so I ran these large barns of thoroughbred racehorses and usually worked for men and oversaw men. And the misogyny in primarily male industries is absolutely disgusting. So this to me is not surprising that this still goes on in tech. We've known for a long time, studies have shown that AI software, the facial recognition stuff is flawed and it doesn't recognize people of color in the ways that it should. So her raising those concerns should be welcome rather than, stifled or oppressed or reprimanded in some way. But there has to be, I mean, Jeff Bezos and people like him didn't become billionaires through, playing nice and not exploiting people. These people are not geniuses. They are not somehow special. They exploit other people to enrich themselves. So these are the kind of things we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that trickles down, that mentality trickles down into the senior management. One of the first things that I learned, and I think it's a lesson I learned by proxy through the military, and I always qualify, not a veteran. I was a civilian attached to a Air Force search and rescue team. I am not a veteran. I always make that crystal clear. I never want to get accused of stolen honor. But in part of receiving that military training, there is a lot I learned about esprit de corps and command and control and how to lead people, because this is a core fundamental part of what people are taught in the military. If you're going to be working in a military unit, you have to understand these things, or you're just going to be a big liability for them. So with that introduction, what I have experienced is the attitude at the top trickles down in the organization. If it's a small business, then for the CEO, that trickles down. If it's a company like Amazon, someone like Jeff Bezos only has so much influence, but then it goes up to the group VPs or the group SVPs or the group presidents, and then trickles down through their organizations. And I will tell you this, quite frankly, it's pretty good public information out there. There are some divisions in Amazon, like Alexa, that people are like, Alexa's a great division to work in. I know people have worked in Alexa for years. They're very happy. Most people I know have talked to that have gone there, including women, have generally been happy. And AWS is supposed to be a steaming pile of just crap to work at. And AWS is even considered the worst organization to work in. And I've seen this in small corporations. I worked at a small company. I'm not going to say when and I'm not going to say where. They had an individual at that particular company who lost their board seat because of so many sexual harassment lawsuits and payoffs on this individual. You couldn't even call it an open secret. It was just open on what a misogynist piece of shit this person was. And they still had the job. And the CEO wouldn't do anything about it. And lots of people would just scratch their head and just be like, what does this guy even do? And then it just leads to the next thing. They wonder, it's like, what does he have on the CEO? Because it ended up the only logical reason for this person to be there. And this is a company that loves breaking itself and patting itself on the back for their inclusion and how many women that work there. And it's a hellhole for women. And the women that work there would tell you that. And some of the women, Jennifer, put up with it because there's no other gigs for them. Yeah. This is as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's the problem. And I shared a story a couple of weeks ago in our chat about a woman who was, I believe, she was some kind of journeyman apprentice as an electrician, who was talking about the several women she encountered in the industry, this highly male-dominated industry, and the sexism and discrimination that they've had to endure in order to do a job that they want to do. So this rampant misogyny, racism, sexism, all of these things that are occurring in these very highly populated, especially white male spaces, aren't being dealt with and addressed properly. And so women are still having to live in fear and be uncomfortable in these positions simply because they want better opportunities for themselves.
And Jennifer, the last thing I'll close with of what I know at Amazon, she in the story that we shared there, she did eventually get her promotion. It took 2.5 years to level 8. I will say this, when you're at level 8 with an Amazon, when you get to that level, there's no such thing as too direct or acting scary at that point, and you would still keep your job if you were actually being too direct or scary in the right to that level of that. To me, that is the one thing that jumped out in that story that went to me and go, there is a lot of teeth behind this story. Because if I remember my levels correctly, level 12 is where it stops, and there's only one level 12 in the entire company. Well, so if you're level 8, you know who level 12 is Bezos for a couple of more months. Yeah. So you're level 12, and there's only one, then really the top level is level 11. And if you're level 8, you're way up the ladder.
So how would a man been described had they behaved the same way? what did they describe her as? Like assertive and scary, or aggressive and scary, something along those lines. How a man would have been described in more favorable terms, and those would have been seen as desirable attributes, not negatives. Because I get the whole "you're too assertive, you're too opinionated" bullshit all the time, and when a man does it, it's acceptable, and they're being strong and masculine. So I call bullshit on all of it.
Yep. You just hammer meet nail, nail meet hammer. You just you drove that one home.